Okay, it looks like we are all set up. Let me just go close that door real quick. All right. Perfect. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another camera class here at Apt Electronics. My name is Saxon, your host. We've been doing this camera class for a very long time, and I know that typically we do these on Thursdays. However, I will be out of town for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll be back for the final class of October at the very end of the month. That's October 30th, the day before Halloween. So, to kind of give everybody the rundown on this, if this is your first time attending class or if this is your second or third time, every month we do the same class schedule. We have an intro class, we have an intermediate class, an advanced, and then a beyond the traditional camera class. Today being the third week of the month, technically, we would be doing our advanced. Let me pull this up. All right. So what exactly is advanced photography and what are we talking about? So if those of you who were around for the first week, you would have seen that it was our intro class. We keep it very, very bare bones and simple. We want to make sure that you know how to use the camera, you feel comfortable using the camera, so we're sticking to the automatic settings on our camera. Once you get past that intro, we move into the intermediate portion, where we talk about breaking down your shutter, your f-stop, and then your speed or your ISO. We talk about a few other systems in the camera you should know about, but this should take you away from using the automatic settings and get a little more advanced within your camera. Start to learn how to manually control it. After we've learned how to manually control the camera, we now want to learn how to pose, how to structure. What should we be looking for within photography? Now, we categorize photography into a few different portions, but I like to tell people that 80% sorry. Starting to get dry here in Illinois, so I apologize. I like to say that 80% of your photography experience is going to come from what the picture looks like out of the camera. 20% of the experience then comes down to the editing of your photo and how you're able to give it the final touches that it needs in order to make it super presentable. And then finally, the last thing I like to talk about are advanced accessories. Things that you might need if you really want to progress your camera career forward and you want to become really, really advanced in the sense of having the proper equipment for the proper job. So what we're really going to start with today is learning about how to edit or how to look and compose our photos. That's our first step today. We're going to split that into two sections, portraits and landscape. For the most part, those two pieces of information are going to be the primary things that you're going to need to know in order to successfully and, let's say, righteously take fantastic photos or just to get your content game off the ground. I like to talk about content creation too because a lot of people nowadays don't want to hire photographers for their business that they own. A lot of these people are using the technology that's available to them and learning the skills so they can take fantastic photos and videos of their own product, business, or whatever it is they're doing. So if you're someone in that ballpark, this might be a great class for you. And if you're someone who's interested in photography, I hope you can learn something out of this. Without further ado, let's get started. So let's start with the tips for taking great photos. Anybody watching at home, chat and ask questions as much as you'd like. I will answer them live on the video stream for you. If you don't have any questions, my phone number and email will pop up at the end. And you can always reach out to me separately and ask anything that you might have. So I'm going to start with the portrait section of this. Now with portraits, we can look at this as both people or objects. Object being one of my water bottles here, people being the woman that you see on the screen. Now, this can change and rotate from either one, so again, don't think that when I say portrait photography, I only mean people. This can be product photography. This can be item photography. This could be if, let's say, you're starting a restaurant, you want to take pictures of your dishes for something like your Uber Eats account or something, whatever it might be that you're doing. So to start with portraits, let's start with a simple fact. Fill the frame. When it comes to portraits, a lot of the times we get what we call negative space. And if we look at the image on the left, we can see a clear indication of what negative space looks like. Negative space is an area of the photo that does nothing for our primary subject that we're taking pictures of, i.e. our model here, the woman. If you look at the picture on the left, you've got the shadow that's coming in from the window on the left side. Therefore, it's casting the molding and the areas of the house to have a deep and harsh shadow that distracts from our model. If you were to put this together for a headshot or for a passport photo or for maybe just something that you want to show off your kids, your wife, your spouse, your sister, whatever it might be, filling the frame is always a good option. By simply either cropping in on the frame or using your camera to get closer or cropping more on the camera to get something that removes the negative space will always add appeal and a level of professionalism to your photos. Within portrait photography, a lot of the times the eyes are the most important factor. For most portrait photography, I would say that that's the case. When you're taking portrait photography, we can be looking at stuff like the dresses or the clothes that people are wearing, the outfits, whatever it might be. But as a human, we are naturally attracted to the eyes. The eyes are an easy way for us to lock in on a picture and then slowly but surely move around the picture from there. The best way to make sure that you keep something in that interest level is by following the rule of thirds placement of keeping the eyes in the top third of an image. This is a basic photography pattern and trick, but it does go a long way. By keeping the eyes in the top third of the image, it's a natural way for us to look at a portrait. When we look at our body, the eyes are in the top portion of our head, or just in the top portion of our whole body. We have our head here, from there our chest, and then from there our legs. So if we keep the eyes within the top portion of the image, it's a natural indication for the person looking at your image to go from top to bottom. If you are unable to keep your subject's eyes in the frame, it's okay. Keep the eyebrows or the eyes in the top third. Again, a natural way for us to build down from the image and start to look. That joke of the eyes being the gateway to the soul has never been more true in the photography world, especially with the camera's eye-locking technology. When all else fails in portrait photography, focus in on the eyes. At the end of the day, the eyes are both not only just colorful and expressive, but most mirrorless and DSLR cameras have eye-tracking technology to lock on to the subject matter. Reason being is if you remember years and years ago when you had film, you'd get red-eye photography where a flash would go through and it wasn't focused necessarily on the eye, so those eyes would turn into vampire eyes or very red. Cameras have come a long way since then, and a really easy way for cameras to lock in and track a target is through a small square that will appear on the subject's eyes. When all else fails, your autofocus will automatically focus in on that eye and keep it in focus, keeping then the whole face within that too. So, rule of thumb, eyes in the top third of the portrait, and always try to focus in on the eyes. Keeping within the same subject matter of portraits, people, or again, objects, things, this is a one that can be followed for everything, and that is getting on their level. Kids are a perfect example of a subject that can be tricky to take photos of. Kids are small, they're fast, and on top of that too, they're sporadic in a lot of cases, and we might not be able to track that. But while this is a beautiful, fun, candid shot of a children's birthday party, by simply getting a little bit lower and using the manual controls we've talked about in weeks past, you should be able to turn a photo from something simple like this into something that adds a little bit more of professionalism and flair. This could be a staged photo, but again, the little girl's expression in the back shows that it feels natural and exciting. The little boy, it might be his birthday, could be sister's birthday, but either way, he's happy, he's excited. And instead of us shooting at a downward angle at them, we're shooting at their eye level, which makes the photo more personal, makes it more professional, and with the camera quality as you're seeing there, It just looks like something you could add to the portfolio. That being said, if we were taking photos of even just the water bottle, shooting down on the water won't give us any type of information that would be exciting. Shooting exactly on eye level with that will help so much and should give us more of a pop when it comes to our photography experience. One simple trick in the multitudes of simple tricks that photography offers that I think is the most important is the rule of thirds. There are many different tricks. There's spiral techniques, there's centering portion techniques, there's right, left, and bottom corner techniques. There's a lot. But I think one of the simplest and the most truly sought after in the photography world is the rule of thirds. And it's very, very simple. Take an image and divide it into 9 quadrants. You have a right, a center, and a left channel. You have a top, a middle, and a bottom channel. You should have 9 total segments on there with 4 major intersecting points. And we have all those circled in red. The idea of this is that by keeping the subject matter within this rule of thirds, you can create an image and make it either more dramatic, more maybe fun or uplifting, more somber or dramatic in that case, but you're adding a bit of flair that naturally, as a photographer, as humans who look at photography, we like to see. It's an off balance and symmetry that often can lead itself to be symmetrical on one or more sides. For example, this surfer. To throw in a little bit of information that relates more to landscape photography, which we'll talk about next. And when I talk about landscape photography, these techniques can also be used for architecture or buildings or whatever it is that you're doing. It just falls under that landscape category, much like portraits falls under a both people and an object photography style. When we look at this image, we can clearly see that the top part of our rule of thirds is crossing on the horizon line. I'll elaborate more on the horizon line later, but it is where the foreground and the background meet. It's a beautiful, beautiful way of just setting the picture up. The surfer hits beautifully on the right side rule of thirds, and the drop shadow hits the bottom. Is there a lot of filler going on? Could we get rid of negative space, much like that first portrait we talked about? Yes. But I think that this beautiful sunset on this beach being so dramatic and then full of life with people walking back and forth behind them does show that the image isn't staged, but yet it's crafted in such a way that it looks intensely beautiful. So not a bad way to do or copy that rule of thirds. Now on the funny side of that, I then look at another sea picture, but this one's a little different because the little girl on the left side is hitting the rule of thirds. Her right shoulder and left or right ankle are perfectly aligned. Same as before, the landscape is hitting that top bar of the rule of thirds very nicely. The water and the sky meet to make our horizon line. The black and white, the wind in the hair add this kind of dramatic effect as she looks out onto the water. Black and white obviously plays a huge factor. The seaweed around it. Again, negative space could be cut off, but given this image and the setup on it, it just looks more interesting and more exciting for the viewer. A simple portrait technique, but also a play on the eyes. The kids are smaller than mom and dad in the background. The kids are pulled then up more forward. Mom and dad are set into the background further, but mom and dad and brother and sister are hitting the rule of thirds, creating a beautiful symmetry in this photo that still is somewhat non-symmetrical as well. But a simple one that you could do if you got into taking portraits of families, or if you were just interested in getting a picture of you and the kids together, and you put your camera onto a tripod with a remote. And lastly, I like to again show something that we've seen in modern culture, maybe to give us a better understanding of the rule of thirds. And Jim Halpert from The Office is a perfect example. His eyebrow is on the top portion of the rule of thirds, not his whole eye, but he himself is hitting the rule of thirds nicely. Like I talked about in the beginning, While there is no necessary cleaning of dead space and negative space, there really is no need to do that in an image like this, because you're still showing off the quality that you're looking for and explaining the situation and scene. For example, you have the tree in the left corner there, the shades that are drawn down on the right-hand side, which should indicate that he's in the conference room from the show. So not only using the rule of thirds, but breaking the rule of negative space in order to then show off one of the more iconic places that they do these interviews on the show. All that goes to say, these rules were set by people who've been taking pictures for a long, long time. However, all rules in photography can be broken and are meant to be broken. It's just like in any art form, we learn the basics and we learn the ways that the masters have done it forever. But by doing that, we then create our own style and our own techniques that benefits us, the photographer. These are all just suggestions and tips that are fantastic for the beginning photographer, but as you progress forward and you advance yourself, you will notice that things will change and you will go and revert away from certain aspects in photography, and that is okay. Moving into landscape photography, and again, we can put landscape and architecture in the same boat, but know your horizon line, a huge, huge aspect to photography that we need to talk about. The horizon line is simple. As I mentioned before, it is the separating line between the background and the foreground space. Therefore, where the water meets the mountains is our horizon line. The mountains move upwards. We don't see the tops of the mountain. We're looking at the mountains as they face upwards away from us. As we look at the sky, we're not looking at the tops of the clouds, we're looking at the bottom because of where our horizon line is located. The water becomes the foreground. We're not looking under the water at the top surface, we're looking at the top of the water. The horizon line will dictate our view. If we're below the horizon line, we will see the bottom portion of it. If we are above the horizon line, we'll see the top portion of the foreground. That is how this works. Horizon lines are important though, especially within architecture and nature, because they help create beautiful symmetry within the scenes. It's a big aspect that we'll talk about in a couple slides from now, but symmetry is everything within photography. Having a line that cuts through an image and keeping that in a beautiful straight pattern will not only help your architecture photography go up, it'll help your landscape photography go up, but it's also a great way for you to be fully in control of capturing the image the best way possible the first go around. When we talk about editing photos, there are ways to clean, crop, and realign your photo to make sure that it's good, but this is a simple step that you can take on your own time to ensure you're getting and securing those results without having to do more editorial work on the back end. Like I said, balance and symmetry play into this whole thing. You have a beautiful sense of balance and symmetry here. Horizon line straight across the bottom portion. We are looking downwards at this beautiful sea of lavender. From there, then we have the one tree in the center, which clearly separates the symmetry of the photo, with the tree being the dead center on the image. Balance, though, comes in because you have these leading lines that cut through this lavender field to go to the tree. And then there's chaos within the photo, too, which makes this even more beautiful with that lightning storm that's coming down. Again, without the lightning, without the storm, this would still be a beautiful image to show and have because of the fact that balance and symmetry exist so beautifully and properly on the image. Another good one. Not only do you have the horizon line, but like that first landscape image that we looked at, you have a body of water that also creates the symmetry of having a duplicate photo almost. If you were to flip this 90 degrees, you basically wouldn't be able to really see too much of a difference. It would look as if those two were connected to each other instead of being a reflection of water. The symmetry, or the balance on it, comes again. The beautiful stack of forest trees in the center, surrounded by a canyon valley of mountains, is just beautiful and gorgeous all in itself. The water is perfectly still, not a single ripple. It just offers a lot of beauty, of elegance to the photo, giving it this really nice symmetrical balance. And not every single thing has to be about forests and trees. Again, this is a clear example of another one that shows symmetry and balance. The yellow line cuts down the middle of the road. It's not the most attractive road. It looks really beat up. But that line continues all the way to the end. And our horizon line feels like it's not even there. But you can see it's all the way in the back where the road looks like it stops, because that's where we no longer can see the top. Another simple technique within photography, sun at your back, and remembering that the sun or light is your best friend. When shooting and taking photos, it's important to try to avoid keeping the sun on your back. Use the sun to your advantage. If your model is facing the sun, there is really no point in taking that photo without getting some form of extra sunlight on the subject matter. Light is always required within photography. It's one of the main attributes that give us the ability to take a photo. Without light, there is no photo. So, try to position it where if the sun is on your back, you can get better exposure from the light. Going from the bad to the better photo, we've done a few different things. Number one, we've moved the fish out of the model's face. The fish is now pushed to the side. The hat is cocked up a little bit more. The fish naturally will have a slimy texture to it with its scales, where the light will help reflect offwards towards our model. Combine all of that technique with a little boost from either exposure compensation or ISO, and that sunlight appears much more bright without totally washing out our model and giving him a almost ghost-like appearance. The fish also has more light on it naturally from the scales, from it being positioned off-center, so the sun that is behind him penetrates a little bit more. Simple, but it takes the color and the robustness of the fish and the water and everything and boosts it. Now I can sit here and tell you more editing techniques, but again, to keep it simple for you, I recommend starting there. Photo taking techniques. Start there. Start with playing with your rule of thirds, play with your landscape photography, and start to learn on how to make balance and symmetry part of your regular work. As you start to do that, it'll feel natural and you won't even think about it at times. And there are probably hundreds of techniques out there that you can learn. But start with one of the most basic and tried and true. Remember balance and symmetry when landscape and nature photography call. And remember within portraits or object photography, keeping the eyes in the top third, keeping the top of an object in the top third, and focus on being on the same level as the subject matter you're taking. Those couple tips will take you a long way until you're ready to learn your next set of rules as you continue your photography journey. Now, I always talk that 80% of the photo comes from the output of the camera. It's your manipulation of the settings, of the exposure, of the white balance, of the ISO, f-stop, shutter. But now it's time to learn about editing photos. And I like to start here at the JPEG or RAW conversation. If we look at these three images as they are without talking about them, we can see that the RAW file feels muted, undercolored, undervalued, and flat. JPEG is a little bit better, more color. You can see that in the shirt, the hair, the skin, but things still seem flat. Wrinkles aren't appearing, the darkest colors of his shirt aren't popping out, the leather guitar strap isn't really showing much, and his skin still looks pale, more robust, but pale. On the flip side, the processed RAW, we see the rosiness in the skin. We can see the green pop off that wristband on there. The leather from the guitar strap looks better. The hair shows more of that sandy quality. You've got the shine coming off the forehead from being outside. The sunglasses are vivid. You can see that there's people in front of them. That is a processed RAW. And what does that mean? It means that we took the RAW photo and we did a sequence of edits to it in order to bring out the quality. We processed the RAW. That's what I'm going to talk about next. But what makes a RAW versus a JPEG different? A JPEG is a compressed file, and they're typically smaller file sizes. Depending on your camera, they could be 2 to 6 megabytes, a little higher than that. I think some of the most, like 24 megapixel cameras, you're probably looking at something that's around 15, 16 at the worst. But they have a low color bit, meaning that if you put this into a photo editor, there's not much a photo editor can do as far as the spectrum of editing and kind of features that are available. But there's two big pluses to JPEGs. It can be edited on any photo editor. So while it might be limited on what you can and can't change, it still is going to offer you the ability to use anything. Whether that's a phone app, whether that's your computer, a free software you downloaded it, or an advanced software that you've been paying for. Not only that, but it also can be transferred faster. So if you're in a hurry, you need to get photos out for whatever the event or thing that you did, JPEG will always give you the ability to get that stuff out quickly. But if we want the best from our photos, and we really want to follow that 80% photo from the camera and 20% editorial, then we need to be looking at RAW. RAW is an uncompressed file, meaning that it's a larger file size. On the small bit, it's about 12 to 16 megabytes. Personally, I shoot on a 61 megapixel camera. Those can get all the way up to 60, 70 megabytes, which when you think about it, my memory card with only a few hundred photos can be close to 3 or 4 gigabytes just in that small little amount of time. But because I have so much information coming in from that larger file size, I have a higher color bit rating, 12-bit to 16-bit on some of the higher sides. That being said, there's a lot more I can edit with that. So I have to make sure I have the right software. It can still be edited as RAW on some editing softwares. But if you don't have those advanced softwares, you're probably going to have to convert this into another file in order to edit and change. You will lose some of that color bit and file size by converting. If you're interested in editing in the RAW format, I might recommend some of these editing softwares. Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One Pro, and Corel Paint Shop Pro offer fantastic services on editing RAW photos or JPEGs. But I jumped 2 slides, so I want to talk about the basics of photo editing. I'm going to give you my step-by-step for how I edit my photos, and I will remind you, as I remind everybody, that as you're editing things and changing things, eventually you will go back and edit or re-edit certain things that you already did. But these, to me, are great examples for why we edit photos. None of these photos, in my opinion, are bad pictures when you look at the before and the after. However, as a photographer, 80% of the work, like I say, comes from the camera. 20% of the work that you're doing comes from the final editing process. And you can see from these subjects and photos what that looks like. The top left photo, the purple on his sweater pops. His face shows a lot more light, so you can see it and differentiate it from the purple. The little girl's dress is beautifully blue, so a lot of the color in the background pop. On the right top corner, we've got the nature scene. It's dark on one side, lighter on the other, but while making it lighter, we're not getting a washed out effect from the heavy sunlight that comes down. The bottom left, the edit keeps the baby soft and more baby-like and smooth. And then on the right bottom corner, we see what might be a high school photo picture or a college photo picture, or maybe a headshot if you're an actor or actress. And that shows the transition from going from something very simple, like an A, to then lightening up the face, adding the highlights to the hair, giving more color and texture to things that are already there, but again, popping it out a little bit. So why do we edit photos? It's to take a good photo and make it even better. So let's go step by step. The first thing that I do with any of these is crop and clean my image. I start by straightening the alignment of the photo. After I go then through and make sure that I don't have any excess negative or dead space, I crop and clean during this time as well too, or spot clean during this time too. Your camera should have a spot cleaning tool, your editor should have a spot cleaning tool. And really all that means is that by using it, you can pick out the areas where you might have dust on the lens, smudges on the sensor, or any other debris that you might have picked up during photography or taking those pictures, and you can blend it in to remove those images. Now with AI and the editors, it's so simple to do versus having to color match and drop and go. Photography's come a long way with the help of AI. Afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and adjust my white balance. White balance doesn't refer to exposure. Rather, it refers to the color of your overall composition. You will have less to play with when you're shooting in standard JPEG versus RAW, but some editors are going to have two different versions of this. They're either going to have a preset that you can control and change, like what you see on the bottom left style, or they're going to have a temperature and tint. So you'll see a scale that then you can change and move, and then some are going to have both. Now you will hear this term LUTs or input LUTs, and that's very similar for that coloring structure of the white balance on your photo. LUTs, temperature and tint, they all have similar filters or ways of changing the photo to add whatever dramatization that you want. Some will have both, and that's a really nice feature as well too. You'll see that with temperature and tint, it acts on a color spectrum that we call CMYK. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and I always forget what the K stands for. But you can see it down there. There's orange and blue, green, and purple. I like to joke it's the Chicago Bears on the top and the Incredible Hulk on the bottom. But changing those two dials and moving them from position to position will help bring out the white balance and help create better temperature or better tint within your image. Presets also help you with this, and your camera has the ability to change this in the shooting mode, but again, we can always change this in post. So once I've gone through, I've cleaned and cropped the image, I've gone through and I've worked on my white balance preset to make sure that the white is where I want it. Now is where I want to look at my exposure and my contrast. Now, how are those two different? Exposure plays on the brightness and darkness of the photo. Beware of making a photo too bright, because you're going to get a muted or muddled look to your photo. Where contrast will play with the dark and light tones. High contrast makes the image very stark with dark or light sections, but low contrast will make things look flat or washed out. The goal for both of these is to aim for the middle. Now exposure is something we can play with on the camera. We can under or overexpose an image. And as you take photos, you will get good ones that come out where the white of the photo is just too much, it's blinding. Or the dark of the photo, same boat, too much, blinding. Perfect example is that bottom right corner where you're able to see the difference between under, normal, and overexposure. Contrast, though, is going to take those dark and the light tones. So after you've played with exposure and it's at the color you want, let's look at the best of the highlights and the best of the darks, and we're going to naturally make them work in a more symbiotic relationship. Some of us want more of a stark quality, and you can see that with the left-hand image, how beautiful the mountain becomes on the after effect when you have this more doom and gloom that's added to it, where the peaks of the mountain that are covered with sunlight are brighter, and the darkest portions of the mountain are darker, more firm. Now, if you look at the very middle image, you can see exposure and contrast playing in the same space. The exposure comes from the fact that the sky is washed out and the rocks are too dark on the top portion. The contrast comes in on the effect of the after as well too, where you can now see the wetness of the bottom of the rocks, but that beautiful dryness and shine / matte finish on the tops of the rocks. The exposure shows that nice blue sky in the background where it doesn't look washed out. You can make out the clouds and the light that's hitting the tips of the mountains. That is the simple feature of exposure and contrast. Darks and lights within your photo are what it's playing with. And there's a way we can measure that, and we call that a histogram. Now, some people really like to shoot with a histogram. That's why I like to tell you about this. Histogram as an editing tool is fantastic. because it'll help you see how light is distributed throughout the image. If you were to look at this, there's peaks and valleys, and this is a perfect or somewhat perfect version of what a true histogram would look like if the photo was absolutely perfect as far as light distribution. Midtones is always your highest, because midtones at the end of the day is the balance of your whole image. Shadows then usually take the second effect. Shadows are going to then give your structures volume as well too as give them depth. Highlights come in to solidify that factor. Those bright sections and portions of your image become more seen and more apparent because you have such strong shadows and such a high class of midtones. So for a lot of people out there, while you're editing your photo, this is a great way to check and see. On your shooting menu of your camera, you can always play with the display button, and you should be able to pop up a histogram to see that as well too. However, while this is a great tool, it can sometimes be a little bit misleading. On the left-hand side, you can see where the histogram is perfect. You've got your overexposed, properly exposed, and underexposed, and you see how the histogram is balanced between all of them. The middle one shows properly exposed, yet we can see that our shadows are low, our midtones are high, and what appears to be the highlights are the strongest. Now, that's fantastic. That shows a little bit of what a proper histogram would look like. But again, histograms don't always tell us that our image is great or that light is distributed in the proper way. We can see that clearly on the right-hand image. All four of those histograms are wonky in their own direction. Some rely more on shadows while others rely on highlights. Some live in that mid-tone and shadow range and don't go anywhere else. And others have a very high content of overexposure or the highest parts of luminosity. But all four of those images are uniquely beautiful in their own way. They're exposing something or showing something off that still works as a photo without conforming to the rules of what the histogram tells you to do. So keep that in mind when you're using it. The histogram is a tool. It's great for beginners. It's great for someone to learn with and make sure that you're following this beautiful kind of structure. I would challenge you to maybe take a series of photos and just focus on keeping the histogram perfect, where the histogram shows your midtones at your highest, your highlights at the lowest, and your shadows at the second place. It's a great tool to try to use, to play with a little bit, to see if you can make your image in this category. But don't be afraid if your image is more of what's on the right side, because all four of those are uniquely beautiful images that could pass as a professional photographer's image any day. So histogram's a tool, doesn't have to be read and followed to the T. So we've talked a lot about shadows, contrast, darks versus lights, but color is a huge aspect of photography. I'm a sucker for black and white photography. I think it's some of the most beautiful and dramatic and just eloquent style of photography you can do, because you are losing color, and so you have to rely on blacks, whites, and those midtones, those strong midtones. However, color is in everything that we see and what we look at. So it's important that we understand vibrancy and saturation very well. Vibrancy is going to increase or decrease the color intensity in the brighter colors throughout your image. Perfect example on the right side, you see what minus 100 vibrancy can look like, plus 100 vibrancy can look like, and what the original. Those brighter tones within the image are popping more or coming down more. Now, the second aspect of that, though, is saturation. That's going to increase or decrease color throughout the image evenly. So something like the dog image would be perfect to play with the vibrancy, maybe peak it up a little bit to, again, make the tongue look like bubble gum, make the brown eyes the dog have show a little bit more of those orange hazel qualities. You got the leaves and the grass in the back, that's fantastic too. But toning that down and up to a point where then you might raise saturation or lower saturation throughout the image evenly is another aspect to it. Some people will play with saturation and bump that vibrancy really high. And then they'll take the saturation and lower it so that the brightest colors look the strongest, yet still feel muted because the background and everything else is a little bit more somber. There are great ways to play with that. So that's the next step after you've played with your darks and your lights. Now you move into the color's intensity and the saturation of that color. After we've gone through everything, so again, just to break it down one more time, we start with cleaning and cropping our image, making sure negative and dead space is gone and that we're satisfied with how the image is looking as a whole. The second step is then to go within and make sure our white balance looks right. White is present in every photo we take because light is present in every photo that we take. So we want to make sure that the color of our whites is mimicking what environment we were in or the tone that we're trying to set. After that, we want to play with the aspect that's more for black and white, but still is important in color, and that's contrast and that's exposure. Playing with the darkest and lightest tones. Not the most colorful, but the darkest and lightest as far as shadow and light are concerned. After that, we get into more color, vibrancy and saturation. How much does that color pop? Doesn't matter if it's a dark color or a light color, but the brightest or the best, most vibrant colors, we can lower or raise that via this vibrancy and saturation. Once we get to a place where we feel the most comfortable, sharpness is the last thing to do. It's one of the last things to do after you edit the other parts of your image. Sharpness is going to bring out definition and depth of field within your image. Too much, though, is going to create a halo effect on the image. And I think that the fox shows more of that halo image. It looks as if there's an outline traced around the fox's head on the right image. Whereas the frog on the right side, you can see the subtle difference in the sharpness. And I like looking at the mouth on the frog and where that nose's shine comes in. You can really see more of the leather, the moisture on the frog, and it pops a little bit more. So once you've gone through your whole step, that is the final step, I would say, for the editing a photo. That will take you from an average image into more of a professional image. Now again, before you get to the sharpness step, you might need to go back. That's an important aspect that I tell people about every time. Just because you move one dial this way or that way, doesn't mean that that's the final part of your image. You might get all the way to vibrancy and be done with that part, and now the contrast and the exposure doesn't look right because you played with the level a little too much. Well, you might need to go back in and also play with the white balance. Change that up to get more of the color and the effect that you're trying to get. It is a constant give and take within photography, and so don't be afraid to go back and correct yourself if you don't think you did it right. Be willing to change and to edit and to play with things. It goes a long way, and it'll really help the image pop. Sharpness is the last thing I like to do before I then think of my next step, which is what do you do with your images when you're done? A lot of people save them to their computers, send them to their friends, leave them on a hard drive, and don't do much with the photo. You spent a lot of money on the camera, you spent a lot of time practicing and working on this, but you've also spent a lot of time taking the photo and now editing the photo. Not every single photo is worthy of a frame, but a lot of them are, and I feel like a lot of people don't do anything with them. So what I tell people is if you have a crop sensor camera, ASPC, micro 4/3, a 1/2-inch sensor, a 1-inch sensor, my recommendation is that top row of photos. 4x6 to 10x12 is perfect for your smaller censored cameras. That's great photos to keep around the house, give to grandma for her birthday or for Christmas. Frame and have hanging along the stairs as you walk through the house. Great way of showing off your memories. If you have a full frame or a wide format sensor on your camera, I would recommend jumping up. 20x24 is some of the larger images you'll see. 11x14 is a great size too. But having something framed and showing in your house, it's a great way to show off your work and keep everything there so people can see. If you're not interested in framing and doing all this stuff, I'd recommend a digital frame. They're very popular nowadays. The image quality is great, and you can put thousands and thousands of photos on one frame. I joke with this because we got one for my grandmother for Christmas, and what we love about it as a family is that we can send photos from what I'm doing to the picture frame so grandma can see them. I'll be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, so while in that time, I'll send her pictures from Spain. She won't know I sent them until the frame then shows the image, but that's the fun aspect of it. So again, rather than just making the photo your wallpaper background, or rather than just taking the photo and saving it to your computer and then sending a couple to your friends, frame them. Take pride in your work and enjoy and revel in the fact that you're becoming a photographer and you're using your work as something that's fun. Now that's all I really have for photography and for the aspect that I think is the more advanced section of it. The next aspect I think that's really important within the content creation and within our new world is video. Video is becoming more and more popular, and we're seeing more and more camera brands adopt hybrid-based cameras that not only take photo, but can now take 8K video at almost 60 frames a second and offer some of the highest and sharpest qualities within your images possible. So let's start and go through. Within your filming, there's 3 main phases you're going to go with, which is pre-production. That's your beginning step. You want to learn location, what you're going to film, what's the script, what's the subject matter, do you have everything that you need to set it up, how's your lighting, how's your environment, do you need to book something or rent something to make sure you have it all, what equipment is needed. It's like that checklist before you go to the grocery store. You want to make a list of everything you need to make the cookies, because eventually when you get home, you don't want to find out you forgot the flour and have to go make another trip back. So pre-production is getting that list together of the initial steps you need to make your project happen. Production is where it all comes together. You've prepped, you got it all set up. The camera gear, the equipment, the subject, the environment, everything. Now is where you're going through and capturing the clips or the film needed to use to put the final project together. And we see that come together in post, where now you're putting it all together to make the final piece, adding sound, muting things, cutting videos, playing with the color, the saturation, everything we just talked about, but in a video form aspect. Things to keep in mind while you're recording. Your video resolution. Not everything has to be shot in 8K video, because most things other than some of the fancier TVs don't even have 8K. But if you're shooting something for Facebook or for social media, HD might be just fine enough. 4K, perfect, over the top, fantastic. Standard definition might be the only thing your camera is capable of, but it might not be the best quality to show off whatever product it is you're doing. So when setting your camera's settings for video resolution, number 1, know your audience. Know where you're posting this video, where is it going, who's going to see it, and remember secondary, what's going to work best for your setup, for your camera, so you don't necessarily ruin anything or overfry your camera or walk into something without having full knowledge of how that will look. A little bit sillier, but still in the same ballpark, ratios. Your camera sensor is a 4x3 sensor, meaning that it is 4 wide and 3 in length, making it a rectangle. If you use the 4:3 sensor, you're using the entirety of your sensor. However, photographers and videographers have unique and fun ways that they like to play with things. So for example, 3:2 will give you a little bit of that black bar. It makes your subject a little bit smaller. 16:9 makes it even more small. And 1x1 gives you that Instagram square that some people are after. Now again, Instagram and Facebook have changed a lot of their ratio rules. You can play with a video and make it ridiculously small. I think you've seen those trends where they're like this big. But you can also make it 4x3 or 3x2. Whatever works best for your video and how you're making it, play with the ratio on there. It could actually give you something that's a little bit more special to what you're doing, but it also could take away from the video. So think about that as you're going. Frames per second, though, I think is an extremely important thing to talk about, because for the most part, frames per second is the way we view video. It's the reason we can view video. There's a very famous video that was one of the first ever videos created of a horse that's running into the finish line at a race. And what we see in that is that it's a stack of images. It's frames that show the movement of the horse as it crosses the finish line. So this is the same way that we can look at it. If we take 1 second, how many frames, how many images can we fit in there to make a moving picture? If you're watching the news or let's say your basic programs on TV, most of these guys are using between 12 and 24 frames a second. Unless there's extreme movement or slow motion or scenes that might take or require a lot more editing, like in the movies. For the most part, average television shows like the news, like maybe soap operas, like your favorite family sitcom that you watch every night, those are using 12 to 24 frames a second. When you watch sports or action movies, those are using more frames, 60 to 120. So when you're filming your project, if you know you're going to use slow motion, or you've got maybe someone taking a swing with a baseball bat, faster or more frames per second are better than less. Because now you can slow it down and get the beautiful swing as the batter comes across. That's more apparent with a faster or larger frame count. On the smaller frame count, again, simpler, easier for basic things. The more frames you have, the more information that's going into the camera. So also make sure your camera has the proper SD card and storage space. Because at 120 frames in a 4K video, like my camera's capable of doing, I could probably take one video for 3 or 4 minutes, and that could probably equal about 10 gigabytes worth of storage. Make sure you have the proper storage for what it is you're doing. And use the proper frames per second for what you're trying to do. Now, there's must-haves in photography, and I like to always say that camera quality, lighting, and audio are your 3 main components. When I first started teaching this class, that was the 3 things my video team, my internet team told me to stress on when it comes to video, even in my own practice of shooting this video for you. Camera quality is always important. Having a camera that shoots appropriately to what you're doing. Doesn't that mean you have to buy a movie-style camera, but it also doesn't mean that you should use your Sony Handycam from 1998 to shoot this. Lighting. Choose a lighting method that works well for you. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the perfect ideal studio lighting, but we don't have that all the time, so we need to know alternatives and what's good for us. And audio quality. Microphones are everything. I talk to people about this all the time who are getting into video, and they say if they should just use their microphone on their camera or cell phone. And my answer is always no. If that is what your budget dictates, of course, start with what you need and what you can afford. But if you can swing it, microphones are about as important as a sound bar would be to your TV. More and more of these TV companies focus less on the sound that goes through the TV, and they focus on the picture quality, moving the customer into territories where now they should get a sound bar for their television to help boost and make the sound more robust. Most speakers fire backwards against the TV, so that sound bar helps move the sound forward to you, the viewer. Cameras are no different. Microphones on the inside of cameras are very small and tiny, therefore audio needs to be recorded if that's what you're doing through external microphones, which I'll show you some examples in a minute. Camera quality, lighting, and audio are the must-haves when filming and making video or content appropriate for what you're doing. This is the perfect example of light. Now, studios will make this a lot different depending on subject matter, depending on conditions, and depending on what they're trying to bring forward. But if I were to take, let's say, my dog, and I wanted to take photos of him in the best way possible, I'd have a fill light, a backlight, and a key light. Fill light's the main one. That's what hits your subject matter. It fills the subject. By doing this, though, you should have a harsh background of shadow. Put in the backlight there. That should then remove the harsh back shadow, making your image look less flat against the back surface. The key light then comes in and fills the gaps on whatever else was missing. Typically will take away the floor shadow and typically will offer you something that doesn't give dark or splotchy patterns throughout the image. We can't all have perfect studio lighting, so we should look for alternative lighting. On-camera flashes are great. LED lights and light blocks are fantastic. And for those who remember the days of COVID, and we're very familiar with most, as we all live through it, ring lights are very popular as well too. Less popular because of the harsh light they can offer, But light blocks or light LEDs are fantastic. You can keep them on camera. You can also put them on tripods too, and they're usually pretty inexpensive and have a good battery life of at least an hour or so. Microphones. On the top left corner, that's an example of an on-camera mic or in-camera microphone. Small, tiny, buried within the body of the camera. So in reality of it, it's a tinny, non-circulated sound. On-camera mics like shotgun mics exist so that way they can pick that up. There's a term, and I always forget, it's like cardioactive, I forgot what it, don't mind me on that one. But what happens with an on-camera microphone is that when it's directed at your subject, it is picking up just that sound. Now, of course, microphones work in waves like our voice does, so these waves move outward, so it will pick up surrounding sound, but the pinnacle of the microphone is what it's catching in front of it. That's why you might see things like boom mics where it's positioned over someone's head. That's to collect the sound just from them. If you don't see that, you might see lav mics or wireless microphones that connect to a phone, a tablet, to your camera, and can be hung and put into positions where the mic might not be noticed. Stabilizing the shot is also an important aspect. So again, for the most part, we're familiar with the monopod, the still head tripod or ball head joint. That's good for regular photography. And if you're a video person, video tripods exist, and they give you the ability to pan, tilt, and roll. Something that gimbals give as well. But this is your basic line of defense. If you're getting complaints or you're getting areas where you feel shaky or you don't think that you're getting the best quality, even with your camera's internal stabilization built on, tripods exist to give you that extra oomph in order to do that. If that's still not enough within your picture taking or video taking, gimbals is your next step. We call the gimbal the run and go or the shoot and go type of setup, where these gimbals are meant for you to walk around and use, and even with the shakiest of grips, give you smooth motion and great tracking features on the subject. So a single-handed gimbal are probably the most popular. If you're getting more advanced and you're working with a team of people, two-handed gimbals exist as well too. And for the person who is the true professional doing weddings or big events, you might want to look at a body gimbal / stabilizer vest. They look silly, but they are technically one of the best things to do in the aspect of stabilization. And that is all I have for you guys today. So I always try to keep the class within about an hour's time frame. We got 30 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I'll stay online for a couple more minutes if you want to ask. If you don't, then I'll log off. But again, people, we typically run these classes on Thursdays, every Thursday of the month, usually the first, second, third, and last Thursday. I unfortunately will be out of town for 2 weeks, so I wanted to do it so that way at least I got all my regular classes in. October 30th is the final Thursday of the month. We'll be doing Beyond the Traditional Camera next class. All that basically means is that it is cameras you can add to your arsenal that are not your mirrorless or DSLR bodies. If you're looking for ways to take videos at heights you've never done, waterproof cameras, video-centric cameras only, or even 360 cameras, which have been extremely popular lately, that's what we're going to talk about in the next class. All right, well, I'll stay in line for a few more minutes. If anybody has any questions, now is your time to ask.
All right, well, it doesn't look like anybody had any questions for me, so I will sign off for today. Thank you guys for joining me every Thursday, typically when I run these classes. I appreciate you guys doing this today with me. Today was the advanced camera class. I mean, I only did it today because I won't be here this Thursday. So follow me next Thursday, or 2 Thursdays from now, October 30th. We'll be doing that Beyond the Traditional Cameras. That's this one right here. The last Thursday of each month is when we do that. So we have 2 weeks now until you see me again. But as always, everybody, take photos, go out, enjoy your cameras, practice what we talked about, and hopefully I see you guys in 2 weeks on October 30th for Beyond the Traditional Cameras. From Saxon, from Apt Electronics.